All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Addigy Sudo Talks webinar series. We're going to be talking about a few things today, and that is mainly about preparedness for Ventura and iOS 16. But this series talks about a lot of things here going on within the Apple space and with Addigy. And so come back each month. We're going to have different topics to kind of go over. So a really good series that's been started here. So appreciate you guys for joining. So we're going to talk about what you need to know before transitioning to macOS Ventura and iOS 16. So this is going to be getting prepared for the new releases that are going to be coming here for Ventura and things you've already seen in iOS 16 because iOS 16 was released in September. My name is Craig Richards. I'm a senior product manager here at Addigy, and I'm joined by Bryce, who is a product manager as well. And let's talk about what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to go over what's new in macOS Ventura and iOS 16. We're going to do just a brief dive into some of the high-level topics that were shown. Reason being is that Apple has great documentation on what they've released and what you're going to be seeing there. So we're going to talk just briefly, just a brief overview, but then we're going to go into planning for fleet upgrades. What does that look like? What are some things that you should be doing now if you haven't been doing that already? We're going to talk about system updates via MDM and the changes that are there to prepare us that came out in Monterey. And what does that mean for Addigy's private beta? And we can talk more about that. Then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So we have a full list of things to talk about. macOS was released is going to be released in October here. We're really close. We just got beta 11 here just today. So it looks like we at least have another week here before we have Ventura. And then iOS 16 was released in September. So with this, I'm going to let Bryce kind of go through some of these things here with you and take it away, Bryce.
Thanks. So good afternoon, good evening, good night, everybody. Kind of just first thing I want to go into is what's new with macOS 13 and iOS 16. There's a lot new, but what are the things that we really care about when it comes to device management and understanding that better? So high level for macOS, the declarative device management is going to help us get some more real-time info for configuration, so you get faster device state check-in. System settings, thing to note there. System preferences panes are gone. That is now looking more and more like iOS and iPad OS. So one thing to keep in mind there about your system preference panes, profiles, and restrictions there. Passkeys going to be there to expand on and help more with the password management on device and synchronizing with iCloud keychain and across devices. Rapid security response to get those security updates and improvements out faster. It's not standard software updates. These are things that can be applied per Apple without a restart. And then service management MDM profile, which currently right now that is in Addigy, to put that payload out there to allow you to control and turn off or on login apps within the system settings there. And that payload will be there whenever Ventura rolls out, ready to use for that. The QR code there goes to the Apple info page about the macOS release. And for iOS, kind of broken record, same thing, declarative device management, which is huge for, again, getting that more real-time state information for those configurations from the device and the state of the device faster when they check in. Device attestation, which kind of is getting you more, what's the best way to describe it? I'm thinking about it in the MDM terms where the MDM server is going to have the query out to the device, going to get information about those new keys and return it to the server so and evaluate that device. So you can think of it kind of like a trust or evaluation as the function of that, where the input and the posture about that device client comes in and the output is to grant or deny access there. And also numerous MDM profiles and keys for both of those are out there. If you really want to nerd out, there's stuff in the MDM protocol guide for all those. Again, the QR code there going to the iOS 16 release page. Go to the next one there. So preparing for your upgrade. I think about this a lot. I used to be a MDM Apple admin myself, and then have been in the MDM space for a number of years. It's always a fun time of year. It always comes in the most inopportune time of the year, it seems, no matter whenever it is. For education, obviously, this is their busy time. It comes at an inopportune time at the start of the school year for that. But what are the things that you can do yourself to prepare better for that and have a smoother rollout? One of the things I always found helpful was having an up-to-date device inventory. So what devices can even update? Being in the EDU space, sometimes you have older devices. You might have those in your environments. So being able to better understand what devices you should be gauging as updated or not, so you can kind of report back to management if they ask where you're at on that. Having an up-to-date software inventory, what critical software can run on the latest OS update. That's great, you can have the update, but if your critical apps don't work for whatever department it may be within your organization, it's going to be a problem. So I always make sure I have a list of that, go through and just spot check, hey, are they going to support macOS Ventura or iOS 16? A little bit less of an issue on the iOS side. So with that, what's the way that you're going to get the update on those devices? So right now in private beta, we have the system updates via MDM, which Craig will be talking about in just a minute here. And basically that's going to make it a lot easier to deploy those updates via the MDM channel to the device. Now, let's say, great, you can get that out there easier, but you don't necessarily want to update your devices. Maybe, on the earlier point of your software inventory, maybe you had an issue where, hey, I always think of some obscure like music app in the education space that hasn't been rewritten for years. Now it's not going to work. I need to get that updated first. There is a MDM profile restriction you can deploy to hold that update for up to 90 days on the device. Another thing to keep in mind with the system updates private beta, the new feature does require the device be on macOS 12 and iOS 13 or higher, so a few versions back on iOS, and the device must be supervised for it to go ahead and acknowledge that command and do that update automatically like Craig will be talking about. So we'll get into that in just a little bit here. Another thing then for information on the actual OS beta program, test early, test often, that QR code there will take you to the page for the Apple beta program. And as Craig and I were making the finishing touches, beta 11 rolled out this morning, so I'll strike through on the 10. It literally actually happened, I think, 5 or 10 minutes after we closed the tab and moved on to the next task. So new beta, but that's good. I always like more betas over something coming out with an issue. So with that, I'll turn it over to Craig to talk more about those system updates via the MDM channel.
Yeah, and these the restrictions and deferrals and all of that are going to be really key, especially as you're kind of testing your critical software. So as you're kind of as you're looking at what can you do and whatnot, it's always great to test. So all of these kind of play hand in hand, and Bryce, thanks for that. Let's jump into talking about the methodology around how do we get devices upgraded to Ventura when we're ready, to iOS 16 when we're ready. And we're doing that with system updates. And traditionally, system updates have really used to be done through command line interface tools. So you were using software update, which is a terminal command that you can run, and it would provide those updates for you. And that's how you would go and you would see what was available in the software catalog, and your device would pick what you needed to do. And so Apple started moving away from that method, and they started realizing that they wanted to do this all via the mobile device management protocol. And so they started this in late Big Sur with some test runs and some things that they started migrating over. And they were preparing this for release with Monterey, so with macOS 12. And as we worked through and we're working with trying to implement some of those things, we found that it just wasn't quite ready yet. And so after a couple revisions and a couple minor updates with Monterey, in 12.3.1, we really got a fully realized version of this. Now, there are always things as we mature within the new process that things are going to change and things are going to be a little bit better. And we're seeing that maturity as it kind of moves forward, and we're going to be seeing some newer things in Ventura. But through this implementation and this first iteration of this in Monterey, we really kind of worked hard to fully grasp what we could move to make it reliable. So, with these system updates now in MDM, you can push all OS updates and upgrades to your devices automatically. Now, this is a very important key point here, is that you can also push upgrades, meaning you can change your OS version. So this is awesome. This is great. This is something that, in putting this all through, you could do this with software update a little bit too, as you saw with, when you look at system updates and you see something like, oh, Monterey is available, upgrade to Monterey. This is now fully baked in and fully realized as something that you can do. And so with Addigy, what we're doing here at this point is we've gone to a rules-based approach for our devices. So we want to be able to make sure that, we either keep devices on a specific system, but still get minor and patch updates, or we want to make it so that you can, I don't care. I want everyone to be on the latest and greatest and live cutting edge. So, you have some options here. But there's some nuance to this with everything that we have and making sure devices are up to date, which can be very invasive and can cause some really big downtime. There are some, nuances that we really need to catch. So by default here within Addigy, you can set the maximum version of an OS that you want to be on. So in the example I'm seeing here, I'm keeping it 12.9.99. Now, naturally, 12.9.99 does not exist. But what this allows me to do is it keeps me on Monterey, and it allows me to say, I want all of my devices within this policy to be updated to every patch and minor update of Monterey. I do not want to move past and go into Ventura. But the thing is that we still have to work within Apple's sandbox on how updates are shown and how long we can, kind of defer updates or, keep them visible from an end user. So maximum version does not replace the major OS update deferral process or that MDM configuration profile. So that is still something that you will want to 100% pull out so that you can and deploy out to your fleet so that you can make sure that you're ready to upgrade when you are ready. Now, the max number of days still has not changed from Apple. That is still a max of 90 days. So 3 months is really what you're looking at in terms of a block time or do not show this update time. What maximum version does for Addigy is that it prevents Addigy from installing that and using the commands to run those updates for you. So we're not going to go ahead. We're not going to do that. So we block you from that. But the end user, if they go in the software update themselves, they'll still be able to see that major OS upgrade in system settings without, and they can just click it and install it. So there are some, of course, caveats here, and this is in private beta. So let's talk a little bit about the private beta. So this is new. This has been out since October 5th. So that was last Wednesday, and it is live. Private beta is live. If you'd like to have access to this, to test this as well in your environment on some test machines and get ready for Ventura and utilize this process, just contact the product team, project@addigy.com. We're more than happy to kind of get you on board, and so you can kind of take a look and run through system updates here. Things that we're going to have coming in the beta that you did not see in that earlier example is tvOS support, but we'll have that soon. Customized update schedules and more restart options. So right now we're using the default restart option. So that means that after it's run and done, then it's going to go ahead and restart the machine. So we want to make sure that you're testing this out first and making sure everything is working the way you want it to work before doing any kind of major deployments or anything like this. This QR code will take you directly to our system updates KB on the Addigy site. This has a really in-depth KB article on everything that has to do with system updates, everything that is in the betas at the moment. And we're going to continuously update this. And this is very transparent about everything that's happening, when it's happening, etc. So I definitely recommend that you bookmark this KB, as this is going to be a very, very important KB to kind of keep going through. So if I go back to this earlier example here, I kind of want to highlight a few things. So as Bryce was talking, earlier on these, is that the requirements for doing upgrades in this manner, you're going to need to be on macOS Monterey and up. You're going to need to be on iOS 9, iPadOS 13, and tvOS 12. That's what's going to be completely. It's a requirement for it. If you have older devices that you need to get to Monterey before that, you can use Addigy's built-in software updates mechanisms for macOS that are there. For iOS, it's a little bit of a different story, but for macOS, you can definitely continue to do so. You see macOS updates in the tabs at the top. The devices also need to be in supervised mode. This is a requirement from Apple. So unsupervised devices are not going to receive that command at all, and they're not going to execute on it. So make sure that these devices are supervised. For Mac OS, devices that are supervised are user-approved MDM enabled. So once that is given to the device, and that's usually done during enrollment. So either through automated device enrollment, you're going to automatically have that, or if you're doing a manual MDM enrollment and you approve it and go through that system approval, it will make that mark that device is supervised. So please go ahead and give that a shot. We'd love to see you guys on that beta and give us some feedback on that as we kind of move forward. So 2 ways to update. Let me just recap a little bit here. MDM is the feature on how Apple has said that you want to upgrade all of your devices. However, some devices do not support that. So anything like Big Sur and lower are going to have issues utilizing that. So we want to make sure everyone gets up to Monterey as fast as possible so that you can utilize and start utilizing these processes that Apple is providing. Bryce, is there anything else that you want to add here around the system updates and MDM or anything along those lines?
Yeah, and actually there was a few Q&A questions I was frantically typing while you were talking to answer them. But one of the points I want to bring up from, Craig and I probably have tested this between us, I don't know, maybe 100 times more. I don't know. I've done a lot of updates. My caching server's getting a real good workout at my house. The minor updates, one of the points someone had asked about was the prompt on the end user side for credentials. The minor updates, so 12.0 to 12.4 to 12.5 to 12.6, 12.6.1. I've done all those different combinations, permutations of them. It just kicks off on the device as soon as the device checks in, acknowledges the command, pulls it down from caching server or where Apple's CDN, however it's being pulled for that. Pulls it down, goes ahead, runs it. And if there's nothing on the device there, it went ahead, rebooted and did that. iOS, same thing. Obviously, there's no credential prompting there. Would go ahead, kick off, and do that update there.
Great, awesome. So let's go ahead and talk about blocking macOS upgrades. So in the past, when we would go through and we would use, and let's use Addigy for instance, we might have the public software, to go ahead and upgrade to the next OS, or we might do something along those lines. And blocking upgrades to, and using MDM is a much more nuanced and layered approach that you need to start taking, because it includes a different avenue now of doing these updates. So the restrictions in the M profile that we talked about, deferring major and minor OS upgrades and updates, are really important. This is something that you want to have out, and this is only able to be done via MDM. So you want to make sure that you're deploying this via MDM to your devices, and make sure that this is out here. This effectively hides that update in system preferences for the end user. Now, this does not stop the end user from going to the App Store and downloading the new OS and then installing the OS. That is, this is just stopping it from being shown in system or in software update on macOS. You can deploy Addigy's macOS blocker for Ventura that's in the public software catalog that will look for the .app to run, and it will go ahead and stop that process from running. So you can definitely go ahead and do that as well. Now, the minor updates, defer minor updates is really key right now in the beta testing phase because Apple has a bug at the moment where minor versions of Ventura are showing up for people who are on Monterey and do not want to upgrade to Monterey, and that will have an issue and it will take you and will act as a major upgrade, even though it's a minor update. So you want to make sure that you're looking at those and testing that out. That is supposed to be fixed in macOS 12.6.1. But until that time, it's not going to be fixed in anything earlier than 12.6.1. So you're going to want to make sure you update your devices to 12.6.1 as soon as possible. So that way there is no hiccups and there aren't any chances or leaks for you to accidentally upgrade someone to Ventura. So you want to set those appropriate rules in Addigy system updates. So if you're in the private beta, you're going to want to go in and make sure you have your rules set the way you want them to be so that so Addigy doesn't accidentally go through and upgrade based off the settings that Apple's provided. So we're monitoring that situation and hope to really kind of take a look there and make sure that when that's fixed, we can test that and test that thoroughly, make sure that's fixed. Blocking upgrades is tough because Apple really believes that a lot of their fixes are only going to matter and be put into those upgrades. So major, minor, and patch upgrades. So it's not something that we actively want to always say yes you should block etc. You should do diligent testing. So going back to Bryce's slide talking about how to prepare for upgrades is you want to make sure that you are going through a systemized or an itemized checklist of everything that you're there, making sure that your software is up to date and that the vendor does have a Ventura compatible piece of software for there. And I understand that in many organizations that sometimes is not possible because those updates don't come fast enough. So we want to give you some options here, but Apple has made it a little bit of a little harder than in years past to really kind of make sure that you're fully blocking an OS upgrade. And with that said, Bryce, I want to turn it over to you so that we can talk some Q&A. I know there's probably some gaps here that you guys have questions on that we definitely would love to go over and spend some time doing this because there's a lot to talk about here and a lot of stuff that we couldn't add because we would have to do a lot of demoing for some of these things. So we want to let's see what we can answer for you today. So Bryce, take it away.
Yeah, so I guess the first one kind of for us to talk about is the blocking of the install.app along with the 90-day deferral. How do those interact with the MDM apps or MDM OS updates and how that's set and pushed out to the device?
It's a very good question, and it's one that we are actively, Bryce and I are still testing through because right now in all of the minor updates, everything just kind of goes through. There's nothing really that you download or anything. It follows the same exact software update process that you see. And so the end user, once you push those commands out, the end user sees that same process. Like if they went to software update, they would see everything downloading and installing and it kind of going that same route. Now, with moving to a new upgrade to a new OS, that in of itself is a little still tricky because the .app and everything that's there, we need to do a little bit more testing on to fully understand that. But as of right now, the blocking of the .app and the deferral should be more than enough to block that at the moment via MDM.
One of the other questions or kind of themes I was answering there is, what does the end user see? Kind of like I talked about a little bit earlier. For the minor ones, it does kick off, and if there is no user activity, no apps open, nothing open in the session, it'll acknowledge it, it'll go and do its reboot, and when the end user comes back, every time because I had them run overnight or different times, the device was updated and back right where I left it on that user session blank desktop. Question around what happens when a user session has something open where it would, close their work or whatever's on there when the device is even possibly in sleep there.
Yeah, so as it stands right now with the default option, it's going to tell you, hey, I need to restart. It gives you a macOS native notification in the top right, and it's going to kind of give you like a little bit of a countdown to do so, and it will restart. As the betas progress inside of system updates for us at Addigy, we're going to be adding different restart options. So there are more MDM restart options that are available to us to use, and we plan on using those. So that you can have different experiences based on your organization's needs. So 100%, we're going to have different restart options. As it stands in the private beta today, we use the default option for restart, which is after it needs a restart, it just is going to alert the end user and restart it.
Sure. So another point then is, what does the schedule for this look like? What does the, when you hit the button and say, okay, I want the update to go out, everybody go on 12.6.1, when does that take place?
So as it stands right now, those devices, if they're online, will check in with MDM. MDM will say, hey, we're going to get a list of updates for you that you need to do. We're going to look at that list of updates, and we as an Addigy, and then we will send a command to install the latest update that it needs. So let's just say you're on macOS 12.4 and you need to get to 12.6.1, but there was a 12.5. I believe there was a 12.5.1 and a 12.6. We're going to skip all of those and take you right to 12.6.1. So that is going to be based on communication with MDM. So the device needs to have an active internet connection, and it needs to make sure that it is connected to MDM for it to receive those commands. So that time can take anywhere from immediately to 30 minutes or so. So it can take some time to get there, but once it's there, it starts immediately. And so the end user can start seeing this when they go into system preferences and look at system updates. They'll see the same bar as if they clicked it themselves.
Sure. So all this hinges on device supervision. As we know, if you have a device that you go and run through automated device enrollment, that's going to be supervised. Let's say we have some devices out there in our organization that aren't supervised. What's our path to get those to the point that we're ready to actually go ahead and utilize this for Ventura and beyond?
So if they aren't supervised, they're going to need to do some work on the device, because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Bryce, it's been a minute since I've dealt with some unsupervised things here, but I believe that you need to be at the device to do user-approved MDM. It's not something that you can do through remote control. So it is something that requires either the end user to go through that steps to approve the MDM profile, or a technician needs to go out there and do that themselves. Getting those devices on there. So usually most devices, especially if we're talking about Mac OS in particular, most devices, when they've done an MDM enrollment, whether that's for that first initial enrollment and they manually install the enrollment profile, once they've gone through that process, that would automatically make them supervised because it's gone through the appropriate process. If it's for iOS, I believe for supervision and everything along those lines, is that through ADE, Bryce?
Sorry, I was Googling to make sure that I was correct. I had the enable, you can use App Remote Desktop to enable that. I was trying to figure out what version that had taken place, but yes, that would be through ADE where you would actually have that go through.
Yeah, so for iOS devices, you're gonna wanna make sure you are up to speed on Apple Business or Apple School Manager, the process to get them devices into that and have them be deployed through that. That does require a wipe on iOS and iPadOS devices, and I believe tvOS devices as well. Whereas macOS is much more flexible with that and allowing you to do that.
Let's see here, back to the questions. So the restart options, there was a couple other questions that came up even after we had talked about that. The other restart options, those are just MDM keys that we would then be specifying. Do you know what those are off the top of your head, just so we know what the user behavior would look like? Can you hear me, Craig? John, can you hear me?
I've returned, sorry. So one of the downsides of using Ventura as your daily driver is that when you click on something that's not fully updated for Ventura, it crashes my program. So do not be like me, that is for sure.
Can you hear me, Craig? Oh, there you are.
Can you hear me? Okay, testing.
Yes.
Yes.
Great, great, great. Well, I will not be opening the questions panel because that is what crashed my screen.
Yeah,
So,
I got you there. So one of the next questions we're going to cover right there before it crashed on you, what for the restart options, is there, just from the key values, other than the 60-second countdown, what are other options there?
so under KB, there is a link to the Apple documentation, and I know I'm going to flub some of this information up because I don't know them by heart. But there is an install later command. There is a download only. There's a download in cache, and then there's some other options there. So jump into that KB for sure. Let me double check and see if we can get that KB over to you guys so you guys can take a look at that. That's over in the Apple documentation that we can kind of talk about there. But yeah, there's more options there. Install later for sure. Download in cache, and a couple other pieces there. Now, in terms of changing times and deferrals and things of that nature, requires a little bit more of research into. There are some there that we can take advantage of. We're still in the discovery and planning phase for how we can implement that into system updates. So I don't want to say for certainty that everything makes that cut, but there will be things there for it.
Okay. A question kind of for those that are not in the beta or will not be in the beta before Ventura drops this month. What, with the current existing settings page within policies for the updates, what's that behavior going to look like for it picking up the update and running it, and the end user seeing that with the old software update binary style?
We have not had a lot of great success with the old binary and doing updates to the new OS. It is not a great experience, and it is not something I can recommend. This is utilizing the old command line interface that Apple has used there, and while there is some modicum levels of support there, it's not the greatest experience. So in that vein, I can't really fully recommend that as it's to use as a main driver for doing deployments to the new OS. What I would recommend at that stage is something more customized, either through smart software or through the public software catalog through the deployments is what I would recommend for those. So if you're looking to do a Ventura deployment, I would use those methods as opposed to the macOS update method.
Gotcha. Yep, agreed. For those that are going to be using the new functionality for install, what does that look like on the admin side to kick that off for that? Is it a group, or can you kick it off per device, or what's the granularity on that?
That's a great question. So you have the ability to do it per policy. So you can create a policy and either do use Flex in an auto assignment form so that you could have devices come in and pick it up as you want to, or you could do it through manual assignment and add devices to this policy, and you would set your settings there. So as it stands right now in the private beta, it will run nightly at 2 a.m. UTC. So it is going to check every night to see if there are updates for you and then apply those updates to those devices. So there's an automatic method. There is also a manual method so that you can go ahead and trigger that to run whenever you want it to run. So that's going to be per policy. And then in your devices tab in the policy, you have options there to go ahead and do it per device or per specific devices that you want to do. So it's not all or nothing. You can pick and choose how many devices or a single device, etc. And you can see all of that there. All of that goes into greater detail on that system updates KB as well, that you can see.
Sure. So to go back to kind of like one of the questions we had about supervision, for a device that's not supervised, getting that supervised, what is that going to look like other than re-enrolling the device, or what's our path there?
Are we speaking specifically about macOS or iOS?
macOS. I believe macOS is what we're, the question is on because of the recovery partition, what we're talking about.
Okay, great. For macOS, all that is needed for it to be supervised is to have user approved MDM. And what does that mean? User approved MDM is when the enrollment profile gets installed on the device, you go to system preferences and go to the profile section and you approve that profile or install that profile. I believe in Monterey it changed to install that profile. Once that profile has been installed and you put your, the appropriate device credentials on there, that now becomes user approved MDM. And by virtue of that, that device is now supervised.
Cool. I'm just trying to filter through because the questions are a single row and I got to keep scrolling to read the whole thing. Gotta love GoToWebinar. The blockers in the public software list mentioned the minor version. Is that going to stop the entire update or just that minor version? Could something supersede or go over that?
So for the blocker that's in the public software catalog, it is going to block any version of the .app. So if it is a later version that you see, so let's just say, for example's sake, that Ventura released 13.1 and now there's an installer for 13.1, you have an installer for 13.0, that 13.1 blocker will block the 13.0 app as well.
Okay, cool. Question semi-related to that, kind of what we talked about with the app preparedness. Are there any plans to fix the Creative Cloud all apps in the public library for the M1 devices? They have a whole fleet of M1 devices that they have to deploy to.
Yeah, good question. Not something I can comment on concretely. It is something I can continue to bring up with the team that does that. But we have some plans that are future plans for some things around public software. I think that's the most I can really go off of to really answer that question.
Sure. For the new MDM updates, if a deferral is in place, hiding that from the end user, can they still query and see if that's ready to install there, or what does that look like from an admin perspective? Do you still see that listed within your devices of these can have the updates?
Yes, you will. So MDM is going to give you a list of all of the updates that are available for that specific device. So you will be able to see all of that, yes. And that KB goes into greater detail, again, about the system updates detail, about where that is in the platform and how to get to that. So it's going to be in Go Live, and it's also going to be accessible under policy and devices.
Gotcha. Sorry, I was typing an answer to a question. There's a lot of questions.
Great, that's awesome because this is a really important topic, and there's a lot of just not a lot of knowledge around it right now.
Yeah. Question one, type and answer to this other one. Supervision mode for iPad OS devices. Getting them supervised for them being currently unsupervised. What does that workflow look like?
Yeah, so that workflow is definitely something that would require an erase on that device. So what that looks like is that you're going to be using Apple Configurator 2 to get that device inside of an Apple Business Manager account, and then triggering a reactivation that will lock that device under that Business Manager account, giving you supervision over that, all of the functions of that. So that is going to be the same process, not only for iPad OS, but for tvOS and for iOS as well. Mac is the real big holdout on that, which is great for admins, because Macs have never been kind of built in that secure boot kind of way that iOS and iPad OS were. So Macs still have a little bit of flexibility where iOS and iPad OS have a little bit more. They're a little bit more invasive when you're doing that process.
Yeah, it's one of those things of, it's also iOS is dropping a number of different, or iPad OS and iOS are dropping a number of different supported devices, just as Mac OS are. I know when I was in the MDM space as an MDM customer, that was sometimes, hey, these devices are end of life cycle. Let's, through attrition, get some new devices that will then be supervised going forward from there on out too. Kind of helps with that. But device life cycle then a little bit shorter because you got to lop off those older ones. But such is the way. I think that I'm going through just making sure, but I think we got everything here. If there's any ones that we haven't got to, I'm going to try and export a list here. We can get something put together with the recording. Question about when we're installing the MDM profile. When you install the profile, is a question, I guess, when it's having you prompt to do the user approved MDM, you need to reboot and hold down the power button and change security to less security. Is that necessary to do?
So if that's to just get the device to a user approved state, then you shouldn't need to be changing the security of BridgeOS on M1 and M2 devices. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. I would need to do some double checking on that, but I'm not familiar with doing that process if it's needed.
macOS contains over. Press Command F5 now to turn it on and set up.
I was going to say, if any of the tests I had were an indicator on that, granted, none of them were M1. I did not need to do that when I was doing the user approved MDM via ARD remotely or on device for that. That was not the case.
All right. Well, let's go ahead then and let's cap the Q&A at that point. Bryce, if we have any outstanding questions, we can definitely take a look at that and see if we can include something with the recording. If you'd like to be part of the private beta for doing system updates via MDM, please reach out, product@addigy.com. More than happy to get you involved on that and get you moving forward. Appreciate the time, and if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Bryce and I can be reached out at product@addigy.com. And Sudo Talks, we're going to have another one next month. So we'll definitely be bringing you some really cool topics moving forward. So I hope you guys had a great time. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, everybody.